Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now, we're talking about overthinking, something that a lot of us have been guilty of this past few months, because of the pandemic. So, obviously, something we're all guilty of, and not just during the pandemic, but some of us at any given point of the day, we do in fact overthink. So, it happens quite often to everyone. So, that's what we will be talking about. Now, it is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio, and I will be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. And this is, in fact, the second hour of my show. Okay, and like I said, obviously, there is a lot of interesting things for us to be talking about. So we will get into that conversation. But before we get into that conversation, I want to quickly remind you that you can follow us on our social media platforms, which is basically Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way you can always be updated and informed about everything that's happening right here on Relax Radio, but also right here in the United Kingdom and all around the world as well. So make sure you stay tuned because obviously, you would obviously want to know about everything that happens. And we also talk about everything from science to sports to technology, health, environment, current affairs, international affairs, whatever it is. Make sure you stay tuned because we talk about everything right here on Relax Radio. So make sure you do that and make sure you download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, to be a part of this conversation so you can listen in from your iOS device or even your Android device. Okay. And also make sure to share your thoughts, your experiences with us on 078 because I would absolutely love to hear from you. I would absolutely love to hear everything you have been thinking, everything you have been feeling as well, because I want to know what you're thinking, especially because we're talking about topics uh, regarding lifestyles, personal development, self help, things like that. And I know all of these topics will help all of you, it definitely helps me. So make sure you stay tuned because like I said, I obviously want to make sure that you feel better, that you get over the pandemic and whatnot, so make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually get into this conversation about overthinking. We'll talk about the pros and cons of overthinking. We'll talk about why overthinking is can sometimes be detrimental, why sometimes it can be beneficial, and why exactly it's important for us to deal with it. Why exactly it's important for us to handle this problem as soon when we can, because we need to make sure that we don't overthink too much, right? Like I said, if anything done too much is bad for you, but that means you have to do everything in moderation. So make sure you do that because we will be getting into this conversation about why it's so important to focus on what you're thinking and why you shouldn't let your thoughts wander unnecessarily. Now, and examining every aspect of a question can actually be very, very exhausting. Okay, we've all been there. We've all overthought something at one point in our life, right? So obviously, since we've all overthought and basically overthought stuff, what's important is, even though it's exhausting, some of the most amazing insights that we actually got was through that. And I'm not saying that was the only way we got amazing insights, but I'm saying that even though you overthought something sometime back, even now, if you overthought something, sometimes it did reap good results, right? um and that's the thing, sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad, but what's important is when to switch it off, when to turn it off, because overthinking is exhausting. Okay, and I'm not even going to lie, and I'm not gonna sort of whitewash this whole thing and say it's overthinking is cool, because it's really not. It's exhausting and you're constantly stressed out because you're thinking of all the ways in which something could go wrong. We've all been there and we've done that. And now, when you overthink, basically your thoughts run in circles around your head, and you find yourself stuck in reverse, unable to move forward. And more so, you start coming up with these bizarre ideas that totally contradict each other. So, for example, if you were going for a job interview, you would say, "Oh, you know what? I'm so excited for this job interview," and then that would eventually transform into, "I wonder if they liked me," and then that would morph into, "Oh, I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have said that," or "I'm definitely not getting this job because I didn't do this and I shouldn't have even applied for it." Now, that is how overthinking works. And I cannot tell you the countless number of times I have done things like that. I've been in that situation where I've constantly, told myself like, where I get very excited. If it was a new job, or if it was, a competition, I would be very excited and I would apply. And then, I'd get the interview and everything and all of that. And after everything is done, after the interview is done, after I've been through, the round of the competition or whatever, I would think to myself, oh my gosh, why would I put myself in that situation? Like, that's absolutely stupid of me, because I know I'm definitely not going to get it. But the thing is, sometimes when you're overthinking things, you tend to think of it in a negative way as well. So that also exists, right? Because when you're overthinking things, do you ever think of it positively? Because not really. Um I don't think of things positively most of the time. I mean, I tend to be very pessimistic and cynical, but obviously, when I overthink, obviously it it means that I tend to overthink stuff in very negative ways. But that doesn't mean that it should be the same for you. Sometimes you might be overthinking, but you might be overthinking in positive ways. I mean, I never know, and that's why you need to text me on 07852473 to tell me about your thoughts, your opinions on this, and how you've exactly gotten out of instances and situations like this as well. So make sure you do that, because I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your opinions, and I would love to hear what you have to say about this, right? So, like I said, when you're overthinking, you are looking at things, you're seeing things in so many different ways, right? And eventually, you sort of start blaming yourself for things you didn't do, and you start worrying about scenarios that may or may not happen. And believe me, I have done that so many times. If I was going out, especially if so back when I was in school, when I was much younger, my parents were so strict, so I obviously had to lie to them to do certain things that I had to do. But obviously, I mean, come on, they weren't bad things. It was just going out with my friends or something like that. Okay, so I had to actually lie a lot, because I had the most strict parents in the world, I think, and I had to lie a lot. And usually, when I did that, I would overthink things so much. It would be so bad, because I wouldn't even be able to enjoy myself, because I was thinking of all the ways in which it could go wrong. And then I never actually enjoyed that moment. I was never actually present in that moment, because I was thinking of so many other different things that could go wrong if my parents found out. But the thing is, that's just how bad overthinking can get. And you can start blaming yourself for things that you didn't do, and you'll start worrying about scenarios that didn't happen, or that you think might happen but won't actually happen. So it's a very messy place inside your head sometimes. And I've seen so many like drawings of this as well, and I think the most perfect way that I've ever seen of how messy your head can be is being illustrated is I don't know if you've seen it, but basically it's two pictures, and one is just a whole scribble. It's just scribbled everywhere. It's basically a circle of scribbles, and the next picture is all those scribbles in a line. It's just an arrow, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because if you're someone who overthinks a lot, who constantly has all these 101 thoughts running in your head, then obviously you're going to want to sort of try and figure out those thoughts. You want them to be more organized, but obviously, our brain never works the way we want it to, right? So there are so many different things like that are constantly in your head when you're overthinking stuff, right? Now, overthinking is in fact simply the act of thinking about something too much or for too long. And I know the feeling, and in fact it's energy draining. Okay, studies have in fact shown that overthinking elevates your stress levels, it reduces your creativity, it clouds your judgment, and it strips you of your power to make decisions, because you're constantly thinking, oh, if I make this decision, will something go wrong, will something happen? And if that's the case, then how do I actually deal with it? What do I do if something goes wrong? So because of that, overthinking tends to strip your power to make decisions. And we've all been there, right? All of us have at least lost one opportunity because we were overthinking it, or something in our life has gone wrong because we simply could not stop overthinking about it. Now, we also need to understand that when it comes to stress levels and your creativity and your judgment, those two can actually be affected by overthinking, right? And how this works is when you're overthinking, you're stressed out, right? And when you're stressed out, you can't really focus on anything else as well, and it can reduce your creativity because you're thinking of whether people, so for example, if you're an illustrator, if you're an artist, every time you draw, you're going to, you're going to look at it critically, you're going to criticize yourself, you're going to say, or you're going to think things, and you're going to say, hey, look, this isn't that great of a job, you need to do this again. No one's going to like it, it's not going to pay you because no one's going to like it, and you have different thoughts like that, right? And that's why, even when it comes to overthinking, part of it is about self acceptance. You have to accept the fact that sometimes things aren't in your control. You have to accept the fact that you're not perfect either. So you have to stop expecting perfectionism in everything that you do. It's definitely not going to work. We're human at the end of the day. And being human means that you're not always going to be perfect. You're not always going to, have do things completely, without any flaws. It's not going to be flawless. So that's very important to keep in mind as well, because when you're constantly thinking these different things and you're draining yourself from all the energy that you have to use for the rest of the day because you're overthinking, then that can in fact be very, very harmful for you as well. Now, while we're talking about the detrimental effects and its negativity, how it can in fact be sometimes be a negative thing, it's also important for us to talk about how it can be something good. It might even help you, because sometimes you become, because of how much you overthink, because of how much you observe things around you, you can in fact become naturally observant. You can read and understand people, and you have probably thought of every outcome possible in any given situation, right? And sometimes that helps save lives as well. And I've been in so many instances where people would always, look at things, like, people always, whatever the situation is, people always have different perspectives of it, right? And for me, when it comes to me, I think of every possible instance in every given situation. And while a lot of people are talking about all those perspectives and stuff, and they're thinking no one could have thought that, they definitely couldn't have thought of that, I would be that one person who says, yeah, I definitely thought about that, because that's how bad my overthinking is. So make sure you stay tuned, because we're talking about all things overthinking. We're talking about ways in which we can actually help ourselves. We're talking about ways in which we can make sure that we help ourselves in this process of overthinking. So make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're in fact going to head into a small break, and right after that we'll be back to talk about overthinking.
The valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you've got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be? So that there's a goal. And then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with, and your education level or your lack of education, or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account. And then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's a struggle. Yeah. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million, and they're different. Right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country, to be fair. Different countries have different tax laws, so different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies, and then you step up into different things.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much has changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young, well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, "You had one to forget." That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it." And that was it. So I'd dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relaks Radio. Super excited to be here because we in fact do have a lot of interesting conversation right now, and obviously we're talking about overthinking. We're talking about the pros and cons of overthinking. We're talking about the ways in which we can stop ourselves from overthinking as well. Now we had Jamie texting in saying that she loves the conversation, and I have to say I am loving the conversation too. Super excited to be here, and actually I'm super excited to make sure that you can help yourselves, that you can definitely enlighten yourself and use these tips to make sure that you don't overthink as much as I do, okay? Because I have to say, it can be very exhausting, but also at the same time, it can be something that is definitely helpful as well. So sometimes I'm not complaining about the fact that I overthink, but like I said, it needs to be done in moderation. We need to make sure we do it in a way that is healthy for us as well. Right. So right now, let's get into the conversation about what exactly are the advantages of overthinking and how exactly it helps us. But before I get into the conversation, I actually want to quickly remind you that you can follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and you can be a part of this conversation. In fact, you can just text me on 078 and be a part of this conversation, because I would absolutely love to hear about your thoughts, your opinions, everything that you have to share about what we're talking about. So make sure you do that, and make sure to download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. That way you can be a part of this conversation anytime of the day, anywhere in the world, and that is absolutely amazing. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's get into this conversation about the advantages of overthinking and why exactly it can be helpful sometimes. Okay, so one thing when it comes to how overthinking can be helpful is definitely how it delays the decision making process. Now, again, when we're talking about this is actually a coin with two sides. It can be something advantageous, it can be something disadvantageous as well, but obviously we'll be talking about both the advantage of it and the disadvantage of it as well. So make sure you stay tuned. But to actually get into this conversation about how exactly it is helpful, now, overthinking means that instead of making a decision right away, instead of suddenly making a decision without, thinking about it, that means you'll be making this decision quite recklessly. Without making a decision like that, you're still thinking about how exactly you're going to go about the decision that you have to make. That means that you will, look into it, you'll talk to other people, you'll try to get the opinions of other people, and then make your decision, because you know that that is definitely going to help you. And we've seen, we when it comes to certain important decisions that we need to make, we don't do it like within a matter of seconds, right? We tend to think through, we tend to think through it, we tend to think of all the pros and cons of it, what exactly could go wrong if I make this decision, how exactly it would help me if I make that decision. And that's how we ultimately come to these decisions that we need to make. And sometimes if you're an overthinker, then there's nothing bad, because when you're overthinking things, you're thinking of every possible outcome, you're thinking of every possible situation with regard to the decision that you're making. And that's actually helpful, because in the long run it will help you make a better decision, because you will think about it, you will, think about all the different things that could happen if you make that decision, and then finally will you make that decision. Now, like I said, sometimes you can't, sometimes you might not have time to do that, but if you do have time, um then that isn't actually necessarily a bad thing, right? Because by delaying the decision making process, you can actually proceed with caution instead of, being reckless and abandoning something that could potentially be the best thing in your life. But obviously, because you made that reckless, indecisive, not necessarily indecisive, but because you made that reckless decision, because you didn't really think through it, it might have, backfired on you. So obviously, when you overthink things, that means you will be able to come up with the best possible solution to whatever the problem is, or whatever that decision is. Now, secondly, why it can be good is because it requires, research it. For example, obviously, I'm not talking about overthinking simple tasks, I'm not talking about overthinking simple activities. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about, very, these difficult decisions that we have to make in our day-to-day lives. Now, that's what I'm referring to, right? When it comes to those decisions, we need to, research, right? We need to look into it, we need to see how it could affect us, we need to see the ways in which it could actually change and whatnot. So obviously, when it comes to decisions like that, it requires when it requires some amount of research. Now, many times people just make a decision and then stick with it. whether it happens to be right or wrong, that really doesn't matter, because sometimes people just make that decision and they're like, oh, you know what, I already made this decision, so I can't really change anything about it, so I will just stick with it, whether it's good or bad. Now, overthinking requires research, because you must actually be able to keep thinking about new things for the cycle to repeat itself, right? Which means that you simulate what could happen with every potential scenario with your researched information, and this means that you can come up with new solutions that may not have been available before. So obviously that is something positive, that is something that you can be happy about as well, because when you're overthinking things, when you're trying to find research, when you're trying to make an informed decision, it's nothing bad, right? And I think more often than not, people tend to get confused between overthinking and making an informed decision, because a lot of people think if you're thinking things way too much, if you're thinking about something for such a long period of time, that you're an overthinker. But the thing is, sometimes that's not really true. I mean, sure, you could be an overthinker, but that also sometimes can mean that you want to make informed choices. And I think we live in this society, we live in this day and age, in this day and age actually, we live in a place where people don't really make informed decisions. They just um want to get it over with as soon as possible. So what they do is they will just either agree or disagree to it, and that will be the end of it. But what's important is, it's very important for us to take the time to think about it and deal with it. Because, for example, if you're starting a new job and you're given a new contract to sign for the job, you're not going to sign it like right away, right? Obviously, you're going to read it through, you're going to look at the clauses, you're going to look at the agreements, you're going to look at the legalities of it, and then sign it. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I had, or when I have to sign contracts, that's definitely what I do. I definitely I read everything, because it's important. Those things can be very important. So it's very, very important when we're making those decisions, when we're taking those steps, to actually make sure that we need to make sure that we take those steps to make sure that we don't make wrong decisions, or even if we make decisions, that those decisions will in fact benefit us. Because sometimes there's nothing as wrong decision, right decision. Sometimes it's about the decisions that have a bigger benefit for you. So obviously, when it comes to making decisions like that, it's always important for you to research, think about it as much as possible, and then make that decision, because it's definitely going to help you as life passes. Now, something else that is advantageous when it comes to overthinking is you actually involve a lot of other people in this decision making process. You involve a lot of other people that can actually help you out, that will be benefited from the decision that you're making as well. Now, something we've seen a lot, something we've done a lot as well, is when we're overthinking, we commonly ask other people for their opinions, for their advice regarding whatever situation it is that we're currently going through, right? This actually exposes us to different people with different opinions. And what's good about that is you get this whole spectrum of opinions, you get a whole range of opinions to choose from, or even to make your own choices from. And I think that is best, because as someone who overthinks a lot, as someone who constantly asks other people for their opinions and their thoughts on something, I have always made sure to involve other people in some of the decisions I make. I mean, in the sense, they're not a part of this decision making process, but you obviously value their input, you value what they think, you value their opinions, and that sometimes helps you make a better decision, because the final decision you're taking can sometimes be an aggregate of all those various opinions and perspectives you got from different people, right? Obviously that can be helpful as well. So because that is the case, you're exposed to different opinions, and you can finally make an opinion, or you can finally make a decision that is helpful for you, and that is in fact a combination of all those people who helped you out as well. And why that's important is because different people are exposed to different environments, they're exposed to different experiences, and they have different levels of experience as well. That means you get advice or opinions from a person who's like not at all experienced to a person who's very experienced, and that actually helps you in making those very important decisions that you need to make. Now, in return, more people can also, take ownership of that decision. So obviously, if you take a life if you make a life changing decision and it helps you, then other people can say, oh, like, I helped her with it, I helped him with it, we all did this together. And I think that's very important as well, because it really sorts of it gives people the ability to know what kind of place you hold them in, right? And like, come on, when we're human, we are all human. When a most common feature, or the way we most of us realize we're human, is because we constantly want validation and love. And look, that's nothing wrong, we all want that, that's completely normal. But the fact of the matter is, when we know that someone values us, when we know that someone actually cares about what we have to offer to them, they care about what we our own opinions and whatnot, it actually definitely helps them feel better about themselves as well. Now, something else we need to keep in mind is that when there's an input from a lot of people, it actually creates much better ideas. For example, if it's your office project and you're working on it, a lot of people given different ideas can actually create an enhanced project, right? It's definitely going to be much better than just the thoughts of one person. So that's exactly the same when it comes to some of these decisions that we make on a daily basis, on the daily. Okay, so another reason as to why overthinking can be helpful is because it gives people the chance to actually reflect. Now, reflecting can or reflection of your life or whatever it is, can actually be an extremely beneficial thinking process, because it allows people to analyze past mistakes and look at what circumstances actually created a victory for them. And you can also prevent wrong things from happening repetitively, right? And you can definitely make sure that all these choices that you make, all these decisions that you're going to make in the future, that you're making for your future, will actually be thought of really well, that you're making the correct decision and that you're looking into it as much as you have to. Because as long as the focus can continue moving forward instead of getting stuck into an infinite loop of sadness and despair over past wrongs, the good things can actually happen with some overthinking. So that's just the advantages of overthinking. But make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few more minutes to talk to you about the disadvantages of overthinking and how exactly, you can deal with it. So make sure you stay tuned.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods, they're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK. We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of that company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing. And the company may still have value. It may still be doing quite a good things.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much has changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, "You had one to forget." That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it." And that was it. So I'd dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid, I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relaks Radio. Now, I'm very excited to be here because I do have a lot of interesting things to share with you. And obviously, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about overthinking. We're talking about why sometimes overthinking can actually have both detrimental but also very positive impacts. And we're talking about both sides of the coin, okay? We're also talking about ways in which you can deal or which you can help yourself if you're overthinking. We'll be talking about all of that, so make sure you stay tuned because I know it's definitely going to help all of you, help all of us, because we're all stuck at home. We have so many things going on in our minds in the middle of this pandemic. So make sure you stay tuned because it's definitely going to help you, okay? Now, before we get into that conversation, I want to quickly remind you that you can in fact follow us on our social media platforms, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And you can always keep yourself updated and informed about everything that is happening right here on Relaks Radio. But also make sure to download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And that way you can in fact be a part of this conversation and listen in from anywhere in the world at any time of the day. Make sure to text me on 078 52473 247 as well, because I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and everything that you want to share with me right here on Relax Radio, because we care about your opinion. We want to know everyone else about your opinion as well. So make sure you do that, because obviously, it's definitely going to help you, and it's also going to help everyone else who's interested as well. So make sure you do that. Now, earlier we were talking about the advantages of overthinking and how it can in fact benefit us, but right now we'll be talking about the disadvantages of overthinking and how sometimes it might not exactly be the most beneficial thing in the world, and how it might in fact sometimes have a few negative effects on us. So let's get into that conversation. Now, earlier when I was telling you about how overthinking delays the decision making process, I said that it is basically, if you think of it as a coin, there are two sides to that coin, right? One of it is it can be positive, and the other one of it is that it can be negative. Right. So, going into the negative impact or the negative side of the delay in the decision making process, sometimes we need to make fast decisions in order for progress to be made. Sometimes, even when it's simple decisions, like, come on, sometimes simple decisions don't need overthinking, right? But the fact of the matter is, sometimes if you are someone who overthinks things a lot, then you will definitely have overthought something, a very simple decision as well. And sometimes when you're thinking about something for a really, really long time, something that needs to be immediately done, it can in fact affect the progress that your company is trying to make, or it can affect the progress that that person or that individual or that task is trying to make. So obviously sometimes you need to make fast decisions to make sure that progress to ensure that progress happens, right? Now, if someone is stuck in the process of overthinking the situation, then obviously it will delay the decision that needs to be made, and it could potentially miss the window for success as well. So obviously that again is something important. Sometimes when you're overthinking stuff, you might not necessarily make the decision when it is needed. So when you keep postponing the decision, um when you keep postponing that decision and not really making the decision immediately, that can in fact make it miss that window of success. For example, if it's a decision on advertising or whatnot, but you're still thinking things through, and you're not too sure if you want to take that leap of faith, sometimes you are potentially losing out on that window for success. And instant decision doesn't necessarily mean that you're in fact operating with reckless abandon, or that you're making a choice based on um, making a choice without using enough information. But in fact, what it does mean is that you're trying to make the best choice as much as possible, the best choice in your perspective, from the information that is already available, right? Because like I said, sometimes you don't have time to be researching. Sometimes things need to be immediately done. So obviously at that point, you need to think of it in a smart way, not in a long way, but in a smart way. Okay, you need to be very smart about it and make that decision that you need to make, because otherwise it could potentially affect your business, or that person, whatever it is. So make sure when you're making decisions, if you're an overthinker, that you keep these things in mind, you take these things into consideration, and then you make that decision. Right. Now, something else that can happen if you're an overthinker is that it creates uncertainty and doubt. You can constantly be doubting yourself. You can be uncertain about the decisions that you make. There will be a lack of confidence when it comes to these decisions that you're making. So people who are very confident about themselves and their abilities can in fact find themselves becoming more and more doubtful or uncertain when overthinking occurs. So instead of making a choice, all of the possible scenarios that could happen will in fact be evaluated, right? And because no one can actually dictate what the future will hold, and we obviously certainly cannot be a part of the decision making process. You can These people will have to make these decisions by themselves, and because of the lack of confidence, because of the self doubt, because of all the uncertainty and the doubt that they have created for themselves because of overthinking, those decisions can get very hard, and sometimes they can even make the wrong decisions because of their lack of confidence and the self-doubt that they have. So obviously, they something that we need to keep in mind is that there's always a risk when a decision is made. All the time, whatever decision it is, there's always a risk. And overthinking creates so much of doubt that no risks can be taken. You just want it to be perfect. You always want nothing to go wrong. And look, here's the thing though, we none of us want things to go wrong, but sometimes some things aren't in our control. We cannot control everything that happens in the world, right? Some things are completely out of our control. So when we're thinking or when we're making this decision, we need to understand that sometimes the decision might not always work out the way it wanted that the way we wanted it to. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. That just means that things happen in their own way, and that's completely fine. So we also need to understand that sometimes, you can't keep blaming yourself for things that go wrong, right? For example, if it's something, if it's something related to the economy, if you're investing in stocks or whatnot, and suddenly the stock prices fall, the share market falls and whatnot, then that doesn't mean it's necessarily your fault, right? I mean, obviously it's not like you foresaw the fact that the stock market was going to fall and whatnot, and you can't blame yourself for all the things that go wrong in the world, because you have no control over some of the things that go wrong. So it's very important to make sure that when you're overthinking, or when you're thinking about stuff, that it doesn't affect you in a negative way where it makes you question your confidence and your self-worth as well. So what actually happens, another thing or another negative impact of overthinking, is that it eventually ceds leadership responsibilities to someone else. Look, if you're a leader and you're taking so much of time thinking about one decision, and you're not taking those decisions that need to be taken immediately, then what's going to happen is your responsibilities are going to be given to someone else, because they're going to assume that you're not capable of doing what you have to do. And especially if you're uncertain about yourself, if you're uncertain about everything that's going to happen in the business, then chances are they're going to give your job to someone else. So overthinking can actually create such delays that a team cannot actually proceed. So when this occurs, the leadership responsibilities for the team will automatically transfer to another individual. So even if an organization says that someone gets to remain in charge, the rest of the team will actually look at the chosen leader instead when it is time to make an important decision. Okay, so we always need to keep that in mind. And another thing we need to keep in mind is it also creates this infinite loop of possibility, but without any implementation. Now, like I said, when you're overthinking stuff, it can in fact generate a lot of ideas. It can inspire a lot of feedback, but right? But it also creates a lot of possibilities that get caught in this infinite loop of thought and simulation instead of actual implementation. Now, like I said, overthinking sometimes creates a delay in action. And the best ideas or rather, when overthinking creates a delay in action, the best ideas in the world has been seen because people didn't overthink the whole thing. They just went ahead, took that risk, and they implemented it. And because of that, that's why we're all functioning the way we're functioning right now. Look, it's completely normal to have these fears of failure, to have these fears of risk, but that doesn't mean that we're going to let those things hold us back, right? Because it could be detrimental for you. You could lose your job, you could lose the confidence you have in yourself, and things could just take a negative turn altogether. So we just need to know how to control it, and what ways we can actually control it. Right now, make sure you stay tuned, because I'm going to head into a small break, and after that I'll be back to talk to you about the ways in which you can help yourself if you're overthinking. Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio, and we're talking about overthinking. We're talking about why overthinking is, can be negative, but also how it sometimes has positive impacts as well. So that's what the conversation is about. And I thought it was a very important conversation to have, especially given the fact that we're all dealing with a lot of, we're dealing with a lot of stress. We're dealing with a lot of overthinking, especially in the middle of a pandemic. So obviously, I thought it was a very important conversation to have. And that's why we're here right now having this very, very important conversation. Okay. But actually, to get back into this conversation, or rather, before I get back into this conversation, I want to quickly remind you that you can, in fact, follow us on our social media platforms, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way you can stay updated and informed about everything that's happening in the United Kingdom, that's happening in the world, and that's happening right here on Relax Radio as well. So make sure you do that because it's definitely, definitely going to help you. Okay. So make sure you do that. And also, make sure you join the conversation because we always want you to be a part of this conversation. We want to hear your thoughts and your opinions and everything that you want to share with us. We want to hear it all. So make sure you text me on 07852 473 473 to be a part of the conversation and to share your thoughts and opinions about it. Okay, now let's actually talk about some steps that you can take to help overthinking. Now, the first thing you need to do is you need to change the story that you tell yourself. Okay, now what this means is when you are see when sometimes we all have a fault, right? Whether it's being late, whether it's being untidy, different things like that. You always tell yourself stuff, right? For example, something I always used to say out loud was, I can never be on time, I'm not a morning person, I can't commit to anything. And well, guess what? When that's a story you're telling yourself, when you're constantly telling yourself that you will never be on time, you'll never be punctual, that you will never be committed to anything. Well, when you do that, then that's going to be the story, right? You will never then be on time for your meetings, you'll always be grumpy in the mornings, and you could never ever commit to anything, whether it's a job, a relationship, or even a side project. And that's because we need to change the stories we tell ourselves. If we're constantly going to tell ourselves negative things like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm not confident enough, I don't have confidence, I feel ugly. If that is what we're telling ourselves every day, then that's exactly what we're going to feel. And that's why we need to change the narrative of the stories we tell ourselves, because we need to tell ourselves positive things. Now, what happens is when you repeatedly tell yourself, and when you repeatedly describe yourself as what you believe is what you are about, it tends to not necessarily have a positive impact, because more often than not we tend to sort of portray ourselves, we tend to see ourselves in a very negative way. So everything that we do and say, everything we describe ourselves as, it's all a part of that mentality. So if you want to get past this whole negativity that you have, if you want to get past all these terrible thoughts that you have and you're overthinking, well, then the best way to do that is actually start telling yourself different stories, like, hey, I can be on time, I will get to this meeting, I will try to be more productive, whatever it is. That's why you need to change that story, because everything we do and experience actually stems from our identity and our underlying set of beliefs. So you definitely need to do that. Now, something else a lot of us have a problem with is letting go of the past, right? Especially if you're an overthinker, you're going to keep thinking about all the times that things went wrong in your life, right? And you're definitely going to think about the past and think about every wrong thing that you did in your life. And what happens when you do that is you're exerting energy on the what if and I wish and I should have. But that energy is removing you from the present moment, because those situations have already happened. The past is the past. The only thing you can do is just reflect, then decide that you're not going to make that same mistake, or you're not going to make that same decision, and then focus on the present. Focus on how you're going to make it better, how you're going to make a different decision to actually get better and help yourself. So that's what you need to focus on. Right now, the past, like I said, it cannot be changed, but you can definitely change the lessons, the meanings, and the perspectives you extract from it. So when you accept the past for what it was, you relieve yourself from its weight. You will then free your mind from the burdens, and mistakes and the grudges of your past, and that will stop you from taking or all these things that you have, that you had in the past, all these problems, all the ways that you saw yourself. When you're focusing on that, that will take you away from the present moment, right? So that's why you need to let it go, because that way you can make sure that you take action for the present, you take action for the now. So make sure you do that, okay? Now, something else, that is very commonly seen in overthinkers is when you're just waiting. There are so many different thoughts running around your head, right? And it's very important for you to do this as well, because you need to sort of stop your thoughts in the moment and practice being in the present, okay? Something that a lot of us have problem with is being in the present. And this is not just overthinkers, this is a lot of people in general. We find it so hard to be in that moment, right? And in the heat of overthinking, we stop and say, no, I'm not. Basically, what you're going to say is, no, I'm not going to have these thoughts right now. I'm not going to give in. I'm going to be in the moment. I am going to be in the present, and I'm going to, go through this experience that I have to go through. Now, you need to bring your attention to where you are here and now, okay? And you need to breathe, focus, where are you? What do you feel? What's on your mind? What's stressing you out? Now, you need to stop letting all those thoughts come to you. You need to tell yourself, okay, look, I'm not gonna overthink this. I'm not gonna let all of these thoughts burden my head and affect me. Instead, what I'll do is I will try to control all of these thoughts, and I will, be in that moment. And you definitely need to do that. Now, the goal of this is actually to become more aware and remove yourself from the being of your thoughts. You want to actually observe your thoughts so you can understand what they are and why you're feeling them. Okay. And something else that you really need to keep in mind is you need to focus on what you can control. When you're an overthinker, you tend to worry about everything, literally everything. And sometimes we forget that we can't control everything. There's only certain things that we can control, right? So obviously, we need to be mindful or keep in mind the fact that we can only control some things. A lot of the things that happen right now in this world are not things that we have control over. So make sure you keep all those things in mind. Make sure you are, controlling, or rather, you're not letting yourself overthink and freak out about the fact that you can't control certain stuff. So when you find yourself worrying, you take a minute to examine the things you have control over. First, you need to acknowledge what's on your mind. And second, you need to take a step back and broaden your perspective and ask yourself, what can I actually control? Now, obviously, there are different things we struggle with, especially if it's something like financial. If you're struggling financially and you're thinking of how you can pay the bills, then, there's a different way to go about it, right? Because obviously, thinking things like that when you're struggling to pay your bills is definitely not helpful at all. So, what is helpful, in fact, is looking at your expenses and thinking, okay, what can I do to cut, or what can I cut or eliminate from my bills? What exactly is not a want, it's not or rather, it's not a need, it's not necessary, I can survive without it. And then you can also ask questions like, okay, what are the other ways in which I can find money? What are the other ways in which I can create revenue streams? And that is how you shift your attention from what you can't control to what you can actually control. And that's very important to keep in mind. So make sure you keep all of these things in mind, especially if you're an overthinker. If you have so many different thoughts running in your head, make sure to keep all of these things in mind, because it's definitely going to help you. Okay. But right now, I'm going to end this, and I'll be back in a few minutes to actually talk to you about how exercising can help back pain. Okay. Now, there's an interesting topic, and I have a lot of interesting information for you about it too. So make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few minutes.